I probably said it too often in recent years that we will see a big comeback of Schiava in near future, because on one point it is our most historic variety here within the region. But if you look at aromatic and flavor point of view, Schiava is probably the most modern, the most time or also a timeless great variety, which I think has huge potential for the future. Not in the qualities probably that has been produced 14, 50 years ago, but nowadays I think you can have some very, very interesting qualities all over Alto Adige.
Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. This is the next generation with me, McKenna Cassidy. For the next episode, I invite you to explore with me what young adults are up to in the Italian wine scene. Let's feast on our discussion of Italian wine and culture. Grab a glass with us. Chin chin. Hi everyone, my name is McKenna. I'm here on the Italian Wine Podcast, The Next Generation, with Marc Pfitscher from the Alto Adige and Cantina Girlan. Welcome, Marc.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me.
Of course, we're so happy to have you. Thank you for joining us. I know that you're in Bolzano today at the tasting room for Cantina Girlan, where you currently work. And Bolzano is such a cool town. It's at the base of the Dolomite Mountains, and I know you enjoy much of that for your skiing and hiking and outdoors. I also know the town of Bolzano has the most Michelin star restaurants per capita in Italy. It's just such a fascinating area, Marc. I'd love to start out the pod today welcoming you and letting you introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from and what you're up to.
All right, so thank you very much again. As you already anticipated, I think Alto Adige is a very particular region. For everyone who has never been here or doesn't even know where we are in the very north of Italy, right in the middle of the Alps, in the middle of the beautiful Dolomites. So right on the border to Austria and Switzerland. So it's a very mountainous region. To give you a number, about 85% of our region, of the total area in our region, is above 1,000 meters, so about 3,200 feet. And this, I think, does already say a lot on the area here where it is. So it's all about high altitudes. It's a much cooler climate than you would usually expect from Italy. And this obviously has also a big influence on everything that has to do with wine, with agriculture, and in general culture, I would say.
What is the lowest altitude in the area? Like the bottom of the valley, how high is that above sea level?
The very bottom is about 200, 220 meters, which equals about 650 feet. So this is the very lowest part, while the highest part, the highest mountains is the Ortles, which is about 3,800, so about, would say, 10,000, almost 11,000 feet of altitude. And this is, I think, something very particular, especially also when it comes to wine. We will talk about it later, but obviously these differences in altitude give, in my opinion, a very unique chance, opportunity, or also playground for us here, working with different varieties, different styles, and different exposures. And so it's a very, very diverse region, and wine region especially.
Yes, I can't wait to get more into that topic. Let's start with your background. I think you grew up in Bolzano. Could you tell us maybe how you grew up? Were you in a family of vintners, or rather hikers or avid skiers? What was it like growing up in that area?
It's a mix of everything you just mentioned. So basically, I think next to this very geographical diverse area that we have here, people should know that Alto Adige is a very small scale region, especially when it comes to agriculture. So Alto Adige is one of, or the second smallest wine region of Italy. We produce less than 1% of the Italian production. However, we have a huge amount comparatively with very small wine growing families. And so on 5,600 hectares, this is the total viticultural region of Alto Adige, we have more than 5,000 vintners. So you have this high number of very small wine growing families who over generation grow the same vineyards. And And I grew up in exactly one of these very small-scale vintner families, which means you get in contact with viticulture, with the whole topic quite early, maybe a little bit too early in a certain way. However, I think this is probably the most typical and also quite unique thing here in Alto Adige.
That is really fascinating. There's quite a bit of history to this kind of division of land. Just it seems to be quite a socially sustainable way of living. I recall in the mid 1800s there was a famine of grain, and everyone kind of had to rally and pool together whatever resources they could to be able to eat. And so instead of it being a trendy way to farm together, it's really just a culturally and economically and socially sustainable way of actually dependence on one another as a sustainable model for an economy to exist. Is that kind of your experience of the tradition of what is now these winery co-ops where everyone has a couple hectares of land?
Exactly. That's, I think, a perfect introduction in what the consequence of this huge number of small vintner families is. A cooperative driven wine region. So Alto Adige nowadays about 75% of the wine of the bottles produced in this region come from one of the 13 cooperative wineries. So this is unique. One hand from this high percentage, but what is very unique is that these cooperatives do play a very, very important role when it comes to highest quality in the region, because some of these cantina wineries, as it is Cantina Girlan, are really in the top peak of the quality system of Alto Adige. And this is unique, and these cooperatives nowadays are kind of a guarantee that we can handle, or somehow this huge number of small wine growers, they do survive and go on for generations with small-scale agriculture. And I think it's a very cool way. I mean, a couple of weeks ago when you were here, you saw it, you experienced it, you were out there in the vineyards, you saw it here, the winery itself. So I think this is a beautiful system, which has to be explained, which has to be known. But once people understand the system and see also, especially the advantages of it, because there's huge advantages when it comes to growing. We have really very dynamic, we are very fast out there in the vineyards. From pruning to the harvest, we can really do, we have so much manpower, and especially woman power out there in the vineyards, which allows us to work in a very, very accurate way, all the vineyards. And I would say that this is nowadays the big strength of a cooperative such as Cantina Girlan.
Oh, so it sounds like you're saying because it's divided in smaller segments, there's more people concentrated per segment, so the quality and the attention within the vineyard is higher as a result.
Somehow, yes. Then we have an agronomist, we have a winemaker who kind of follow, support, and kind of consult these wine growing families over the whole year. From the decision what variety, what clone type, what rootstock, what planting density they are going to plant in what specific vineyards, to the seedings, to soil management, water management. A lot of these obviously very, very nowadays very, very complex also decisions. They're much supported here by the technical staff of Cantina Girlan, of a cooperative. But then the operative work out there in the vineyard is done individually, vintner family by vintner family, obviously also helping each other out. And so this is
Mm.
from a working point of view, very interesting system where everyone kind of sits in the same boat. So everyone has the biggest interest that also the neighboring vintner families who deliver the grapes to the same cooperative work in the same qualitative wise way. So they help each other out, and this is something very beautiful to see. And then if you come here to winery and it is a Saturday noon, you will see all these vintners going here, have a good glass of wine, and discuss certain strategies and impacts and topics. And this is, in my opinion, something very beautiful to see.
This is very awesome. Living in America, a country where most of us are quite isolated in our independence, it's really special to hear about this, and it makes me feel inspired and interested in the whole process. What is it like during harvest when everyone's harvesting their plots and bringing them, I know, to the crush pad? How are the plots kind of selected amongst when they're all coming from
Yeah,
different
I
people?
mean, logistically, this is a very, very hard work to do. First of all, 100% of our vineyards are classified. So we know exactly with what vineyards we produce what qualities, because this is already important when it comes to pruning for the yields and everything. So we do know exactly what vineyard will produce what qualities. Okay. When it comes to harvesting, we have a harvesting calendar. This is why our agronomists, our winemaker, they do have to follow all these wine growers very step by step. They need to know exactly what's happening out there. And so for every day, 1 or maximum 2 days in advance, we will say, okay, we on Monday we are going to harvest this vineyard, this vineyard, this vineyard, and that vineyard. From these varieties, for example, only the young wines or only the old wines, only the wines from the Vigneti range, so from our intermediate quality, only the higher quality ranges. And this, as a consequence, the wine growers get this information. They come here, they get the cases, because obviously 100% here is harvested by hand, manual production 100%. They get the cases where they harvest the grapes into it, and they will deliver it in the time where it is agreed. Okay, so we don't only say, okay, I need your Pinot Noir grapes from this vineyard on that day, but I need it at 11 a.m. And this is something very spectacular, which works out very well, because obviously, from another point of view, the harvest is the highlight of the whole year. The whole year you spend a lot of work, a lot of effort put into the production of the grapes, and then for harvest, everyone is really excited. There is a lot of excitement. Sometimes, if the weather doesn't is not as supposed, a little bit of nervousness. Nevertheless, but at the end of the day, it's something which nowadays, as the system in our case is now working for 101 years, is something which works quite well, actually.
That's pretty amazing. That's excellent. Thanks so much for sharing the details about that. I know you make many special wines from a marketing standpoint, which I know is one of your expertises. Girlan is known for the Burgundian varieties of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but you also, of course, make indigenous grape varieties such as Lagrein and Schiava, etc. Is one preferred internationally versus locally, or you find all the wines are popular to different people for different reasons?
From a personal point of view, and this is also the reason why Cantina Girlan for me has always been a very, very important player, or very important winery where I looked also before I worked here. Was a very important winery because of their focus on Pinot Noir. I come from a family where we only grow Pinot Noir. For myself, it's my absolute favorite variety. So personally, I'm a very big Pinot Noir enthusiast. And this is why I think it's now for almost 8 years that I'm here at Cantina Girlan, and it's still working very, very well, because I think the focus our both focuses lies on the same variety. However, if we talk about indigenous or autochthon or more typical grape varieties, there is for sure the variety Fornage, or you called it Schiava. So you always have
I said the wrong.
two languages in German and Italian. But Fornage
Yes.
Schiava is for sure a variety which, in my personal opinion, is extremely underevaluated. And I hope, or I probably said it too often in recent years, that we will see a big comeback of Schiava in near future, because on one point it is our most historic variety here within the region. But if you look aromatic and flavor point of view, Schiava is probably the most modern, the most time or also a timeless great variety, which I think has huge potential for the future. Not in the qualities probably that has been produced 14, 50 years ago, but nowadays I think you can have some very, very interesting qualities all over Altoaja.
Yeah, it's really well said. I mean, I recently had some Scawa from another producer. I have to come back because I didn't get to try yours when I was there, but it's so sleek. It has this richness without an aggressive level of weight, and it just has this very delicious fruit character that's not present in every grape, which is just so, I think, absolutely, definitely a wine for the modern. And I also, to your point about Pinot Noir, I mean, Girlan makes very famous and important Pinot Noirs, to include the Trotman, which has been Tre Bicchieri for 11 years in a row. The Patricia from the Girlan crew, named after Patricia von Elsenbaum, whose family has been farming there for a little over 80 years. So it's very special. I was wondering if you could share, perhaps, I noticed that in the vineyards, you had called out the 777 clone of Pinot Noir. Would you mind commenting on that clone in particular, why it works there? I noticed kind of petite bunches, really, and quite spaced out on the vine. So pretty interested in that.
Well, I think if I can maybe talk a little more about this, because nowadays I think Pinot Noir is very requested, very demanded. It's probably the variety which worldwide we have quite much success. It's requests from all over within the country, but also abroad. But I think the big step which has been done here at Cantina Girlan is 20 years ago. So when times were a little bit more difficult, we would say here our general manager, so Oscar Lorandi, the president nowadays, together with the winemaker Gerhard Kofler, they had a very, very brave, or they took this decision to really focus on Pinot Noir. Not because they thought it was cool or because there was a big demand on Altoaja Pinot Noir, but because they somehow saw the potential of this variety within our growing sites, specific growing sites. There we speak about 3 sites: Girlan, Mazzone, and Pinzon. And this is very important because over the last 20 years, in these 3 cru sites, we planted specifically about 25 hectares of Pinot Noir. And then when it comes to clone planting density, but also especially clone rootstock combination, this has been really individuated by from crew to crew. Make you an example. Here in Girlan, we are on 500 meters of altitude, so about 1,500, 1,600 feet of altitude, with volcanic porphyric soils. This means low pH level, acidic soils. And here you need, first of all, other rootstocks, eventually also other clones. Then, for example, in Mazzone, which is 25 miles more south, 100 meters or 300 feet lower than Girlan, western exposed, and has calcareous and especially clay soils. So we do really pay much attention on the microclimatic conditions, because especially Pinot Noir, but also Chardonnay, are probably some of the most sensitive varieties when it comes to reflecting the microclimate terroir of its origin. And therefore, we pay here much attention. However, to come back to your final question, the 777 clone is obviously one of these Dijon clones, quite historic clones, so they are more than 50 years old approximately. And here we use them because what we saw over years, that they would bring the most interesting results. Not because it's Burgundy, not because we try to copy somehow Burgundy. It's just because these selections have been made for a longer time, and then they came here, and we are nowadays probably with our own selections here in Altoaja, in Germany, in the rest of Italy, not that far, or not that we did not reach these quality levels yet. It's of course absolutely everything but a easy growing clone, because it's very tight, very small. The bunches can pop up very easily if you get too much rain or if there is no aeration. However, if you're able to bring in or to harvest healthy grapes, you will most likely, or at least in our experience, have the highest quality crop.
Cheers to that. That's definitely part of the goal. That's wonderful. Let's talk briefly before we close about your wonderful education that you've had in different parts of the world. I know I live in Illinois now, and you used to come to school here at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. How do you feel like that experience kind of informed what you're doing today and your hopes for the future as well?
Yeah, I mean, I have lived a very good life back in the US. I was at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, and I come from Alto Adige. I grew up in a small village with little more than 1,000 inhabitants. And then I went to Vienna first for an enology degree at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna. And from Vienna, I had the opportunity to go for a year to the US. So from a very small town to Vienna, which is obviously just already a huge city, and then to the US, which has been the much bigger step than going from Alto Adige to Vienna, to be honest. For me, this year in the US probably was some of the most formative years I have had in my education, because I was able, or had the opportunity to meet people really from all over the world, from Australia over China to obviously the US. I lived with three guys from the US, from different parts in the US, and it was so nice for me to see how different they each are. And yes, it was a wonderful time where I studied a lot, but also the rest of the experience was worth. And probably now looking back at it, it somehow kind of internationalized my mindset this year in the US, and I'm very thankful to have had this opportunity.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I know you'll be in the U.S. several times this year. Even hitting my hometown of Phoenix. I've let my parents know to come to the wine dinner, but it's really exciting, and I hope that all the listeners today can feel excited to continue learning about Alto Adige wines and drinking them, and to visit Cantina Girlan, whether in Bolzano or at Vinitaly or wherever they can find it. Is truly excellent. Excellent wines. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Marc, with the group before we wrap?
I think we've spoken much about Alto Adige. I think it's a very interesting, very small-scaled, high-altitude region, which can be very interesting. It's so diverse, where you can have from very cool climate, single vineyard wines, up to very structured reds. But you hear a lot of different stories on Alto Adige, obviously because it's so diverse. But whoever has the chance, come to Italy, come to Alto Adige, and have a look at it. It's a great time for winter, for everyone who likes the mountains, for skiing, ski mountaineering. It's a very beautiful place, especially the Dolomites. I truly recommend the Dolomites in combination with Alto Adige wines to everyone out there. And
yes, the perfect pairing. I love it. Cheers, Marc. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise with us.
Thank you very much. Enjoy, and you're doing a great job with your podcast. I'm listening to you, and thank you very much.
Tante grazie. Thanks so much for being here with me today. Remember to catch our episodes weekly on the Italian Wine Podcast, available everywhere you get your pods. Salute.